Hi there, Rachel Sherman here, and in this video we're going to be covering part 3 of the stats project for my students, also known as learning how to take random samples using Excel. In order to take random samples using Excel, we're going to apply a technique that utilizes the random number generator function in Excel. For this project, you're going to need a total of 6 random samples, which I'll be teaching you how to take. Each of those samples you're going to be using the same process for, so once you master the technique, you're going to do this 6 separate times. So first things first, we're going to learn how to set up the random number generator function. Excel can apply a random number between 0 and 1, of which there are infinitely many, using what's called the rand command. And this command is just equals RAND. And what you're going to do is just close off the parenthesis and see what happens. So if I'm over here and I just start typing some random stuff, you should be noticing how that value changes every single time. That's what you're looking for this to do. Now you're going to go ahead and apply that to everything in this list. The quickest way to do that is to click on that cell. You can see up here, this is the formula that's plugged in, and just double click next to that. And you'll see that everything in this list, even if it looks really close, all of those numbers are in fact different. And just to make sure that something hasn't gone awry, I'm going to come over here and verify once again, as you saw, that these numbers are changing, which is what we need to make sure is happening. Now, if you haven't seen the first 2 parts of this video, that's where we got the rest of this data from. So make sure that you're still using the same set of data and you're just calculating that off of whatever information you plugged in for your raw data. What you're going to do to actually go about taking the random sample is start by copying all 3 columns. So up here at the top, we're going to click and drag, and you'll notice if you highlight from the actual column name, it's going to take everything in the list. So this way you don't have to click and drag all the way to the bottom corner of it. It covers everything. You're going to then copy the data and paste it, but you have to use something very specific. If you come over here, I'm just picking something off to the side, I'm going to right click and use paste values. And what paste values does is it takes whatever is in that cell for face value and it gets rid of the formula. So watch what happens here when we use paste values, and just looking up at the, I don't know, let's say the Indiana value that has a random number of 0.6896 and some change. So when we paste values, that number is going to remain the same, but it's going to change in the other list, which is what should happen. So come down here, Indiana's still 0.689 and some stuff, and you'll see that it's changed. If the numbers change in both columns, you want to clear that out and start over again. Make sure when you copy and paste, you're using paste values. Now, we've officially, if you take a look here and you click in all of these cells, we've officially locked those numbers in place. So that means we can now use those to actually randomize our list. A surefire way to know that you've made a mistake is if your list is still alphabetical after this. It is mathematically unlikely, and I would argue almost impossible, for this list to remain alphabetically. The probability is so beyond close to 0 that there's almost no way it would ever happen, no matter how many times you tried this. So what you're going to do is highlight your data in this list and use the sort and filter, specifically custom sort function. You'll notice that we've also included the headers. So we're going to do a custom sort. See how we have it checked, my data has headers, and then it makes it very simple for us. Then we know that we can sort based on that random number column from smallest to largest. So what we're doing is we're going to organize this list so that the random numbers are listed from low to high, and it will keep these attached. So that Indiana value of 0.689 and some change will always be 689 and some change. So you see how this has now reorganized our list. Specifically, it's randomized our list. And by randomizing our list, it's still saying that everything here is equally likely to be selected as part of our random sample. Because we have randomly assigned numbers, we did not have any say in what those numbers were. They were all randomly assigned, so equally likely as we sorted for them to be rearranged in such a way. So just to confirm, let's look at that Indiana number, and you see that it's still 0.689 and some change, just like we talked about before. Now, this project requires you to take random samples of size 30 and also of size 5. You're going to take 3 of each, 3 samples of 30 and 3 samples of 5, and you have to do this one at a time. So if I want to take a random sample of 30, the first thing I'm going to do is copy the first 30 pieces of data on this list. So from Mississippi down to Pennsylvania, that represents the first 30. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then down here, let's bring that over to our random sample page. So making sure everything's still in order, I'm going to paste. And I like using paste values just to make sure there's no stray functions or formatting. And you'll see that it lines up perfectly. So we have nothing extra, nothing's being erased. Because we had the header and that's where we started, everything's dropping right into place. Now, if you're one of my students and you're wondering, why do you need the random number column here? That's part of the way that I'm checking your work over. If you're missing this, and I have no idea how you found those values, so make sure you are including all 3 of those columns over. Let's go ahead and practice this random sampling again. So we're going to come back over here. I had mentioned that you need to do this a total of 6 times. As you can see from the template, you're going to fill in sample 1, sample 2, sample 3 for 30, and then you're going to repeat that process for samples of 5. So let's go ahead and practice doing that again. This time let's take a sample of 5. And before we do that, I'm going to make a quick note here that this was n equals 30, and we called that sample 1. So just as a note, so we remember what it is later. So let's go again. We start by copying all of our data. Remember, this is the original. So this is where you have the rand command and everything. You're going to copy. And then off to the side somewhere over here, I'm going to use paste values to lock those in place. Sort and filter. Do a custom sort based on the random number. So for this one, if I want it to be my sample of 30, my sample of 5 rather, let's call this the first sample of 5. I'm going to take the first 5 things in this list. So that is from South Dakota to Hawaii in this specific sample. And then I'm going to come over here instead in the template to the sample of 5 page and paste it over. So one of the goals of this project is to see how you can compare all of the different ways that a sample of 30 and a sample of 5 could possibly happen. So being that this is completely random, I myself have no control over what your data is going to yield. If you take a look at this sample of 5, it doesn't necessarily seem at quick glance that there are any outliers. It's possible you end up with outliers. If your data set has 5 or 6 outliers, it's very common for you to see 1 or 2 of them appear in samples. And ultimately, we're going to see if there are outliers, how does that affect taking a sample of size 5, which we would consider really small, to a sample of 30, which is kind of that magic number when things start to become approximately normal if they weren't already. So let's go ahead, pause here, and keep repeating that process if you're following along until you get all 6 of your samples. So you need 3 samples of size 30 and 3 samples of size 5. When I see you back, I'm going to have all of our samples completed. Alright, so you can see here that I've gone in and I've taken all 6 samples in total, and I went ahead and I highlighted, using a different color, our samples of 30 and our samples of 5. So just to be consistent, I'm going to do the same thing here. Just so we can see a little bit better of a comparison. So if you take a look, you'll see that none of our samples are quite the same. It is possible to see the same values appear in multiple samples. However, if they're identical, once again, that's an indicator that you may have done something incorrectly. To move forward in the next part of this project, you're going to go ahead and drop each of these samples into their respective sheets. So we've already copied over the first one, so let's go ahead and copy over our next sample of 30. So this is sample number 2. So I'm going to drop it in this section here for sample 2. And then do that one more time here for our third sample of 30. And then you're going to repeat that process also for your samples of 5. So I still have to drop in my second and third sample of size 5. You're also going to be using these samples for hypothesis testing, which if you're looking ahead a little bit, you'll see that there's margin of errors on these sample of 30 and 5 pages, and that's because we're using these random samples to apply confidence intervals to see how well they estimate the population. And then in the next part, so we're about to see part 4, which is confidence intervals. In part 5, you're going to learn how to apply hypothesis testing. Thanks for watching.